Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to my spec spotlight for the Holy Paladin. This is the series where we take a look at various specs and talk about their strengths and weaknesses and the utility they bring to the table in a Mythic Plus. Let's start off by talking about Holy Pally's pros and cons. One of the best things about Holy Paladins is that they do very, very high damage output. Higher than any of the other healers if played well. Especially, they do good damage in single target, they do good damage in AoE. They do have to use their healing cooldowns offensively to do the most damage, but even if they're not doing that, they are a very high damage output healer. They also do great throughput, and they can conserve mana better than any other healing spec, which can be really good for like high tyrannical keys, getting through a boss fight, sustaining the HPS they need for the full like 3 or 4 minutes of a boss fight on 1 mana bar's worth is something that uniquely like Holy Pallies and Resto Druids can do. Every other healer spec basically can't do that. Speaking of Resto Druids, the biggest con of the Holy Paladin is that they're not a druid. There's a lot of utility that Resto Druids bring that is kind of expected or planned for in runs that Holy Pallies just don't have. You can't, stealth ahead and mass res the group. You can't B-res people. You can't soothe. You can't use Ursul's Vortex. You can't Typhoon. You can't use Entangling Roots. Those are all things that are fitted into various strategies in dungeons. And if you're playing with a Holy Paladin, you have to readjust or you have to get them from other players in your group. And those are not common to exist on other members of your group. So that is really the big problem with Holy Pally. All right, let's talk about the utility that a Holy Paladin brings to the table. One of the biggest things they do is Hammer of Justice, a long stun, single target. This is effectively a healing cooldown on mobs that are stunnable that are attacking your tank if they're doing a lot of damage. Things like Emissary of the Tides jump to mind. A Hammer of Justice stunning one of those things forever is really, really, really good. In terms of like the total amount of healing that it effectively does to your tank, but just useful for stopping mobs' abilities, mobs' casts, acting as a pseudo-interrupt from your healer role is a very good thing to have. They are also the only healer to have an immunity, and an immunity is particularly good on a healer because if things go wrong, if a cast goes off, if everybody's taking damage from like some frontal that wasn't supposed to go off, the healer can, like normally a healer has to move and heal everybody very quickly, and that's very hard to do. But a Holy Pally can just bubble and heal everybody, and that is much, much easier to do, so it's an extremely strong cooldown, especially on the healer. They also have Devotion Aura, which is a damage reduction aura. It's not very strong most of the time, but when they use their Aura Mastery ability, it jumps to a 20% damage reduction on the entire group, which is very big. It doesn't show up on the healing meters or anything, but this reduces a lot of damage if used at the right times, and can save your group through all kinds of big damage. They also have Blessing of Protection. This is useful when cast on themselves or other DPS players if they get threat or something, or used to remove various bleeds like Severing Axe from Cool of the Butcher, or if there's just, heavy physical damage from some boss ability that you want to immune on somebody who would otherwise die to it. It's also useful on tanks to remove things like Necrotic or Razan's tank bleed, but you have to be sure that the tank is ready to immediately click it off, because otherwise that mob will start attacking the rest of the group, and you don't want that. Holy Pallies also have Blessing of Sacrifice. It's not quite Ironbark, but it's pretty close. It's a damage reduction cooldown they can throw on their tank. It does hurt the Holy Pally when they use it, but the Holy Pally can always pair it with their bubble if it's available, or with Divine Protection, which is a 20% damage reduction for themselves. That is up, basically, it's every 42 seconds they can use it, so that is a very short cooldown. Holy Pallies can also choose between having a shorter cooldown on Stun, Blinding Light, or Repentance. That's one talent row. Generally, the best option on this row is Blinding Light to use as an AoE, stop for mobs that are casting things. Sometimes the stun reducing one is an easier thing to play with, but generally Blinding Light is a powerful thing that Holy Pallies, I would say, is the default thing that you should expect them to have access to. If you need Repentance for some specific thing, they can also take that, although I can't really think of any time that's come up in BFA so far. Holy Pallies do have a taunt. They can pair this with their bubble, so they can bubble taunt and take a mob off of a tank for 3 seconds without risking dying themselves. Or they can just taunt something and run away like any of the other healers with taunts can do. And this is a useful thing to have access to if there's like Necrotic, you want to help your tank drop Necrotic on a big boss fight, or if there's just some, your tank is dying and you don't have a button that's going to heal them past where they're going to die, so you just make it so they don't take the next hit by taunting. Pallies can also cleanse a lot of different things. Holy Pallies can cleanse magic effects, like all healers, and they can also cleanse poisons and diseases, so everything except curses, basically. And they have Blessing of Freedom, which can be useful in a couple of specific spots. Like obviously, if your tank is slowed, it's nice to help them not be slowed, or if anybody in your group is slowed. Notably, like the Blackout Barrels on the Council of Captains fight can be Blessing of Freedoms to remove them entirely from the fight, so very good fight to have a Holy Pally on. And finally, they do have Lay on Hands. I mean, Lay on Hands is a little bit weird to call this utility on a healer. It's just basically a big heal that they can do once every like 7 years. But it is worth noting that they do have a panic big heal button. Okay, let's talk about the common builds of Holy Paladin. The best major essence for Holy Paladin is Vision of Perfection, because their wings is just such a potent cooldown. It has so many interactions with the rest of their spec. Vision of Perfection is actually, like, it's a nerfed version of Vision of Perfection that Holy Pallies get, and it's still the best thing they can do. It's also worth noting that come patch 8.3, this essence is getting buffed. So that is an indirect buff to Holy Paladin coming next patch. The minors that Holy Paladin use, Conflict and Strife, really nice just because it's flat stats, very easy, very good in all situations. There are also a couple of healing essences you can use, like Well of Existence or Ever Rising Tide, although neither of those are super great or anything. Neither of them are mandatory. If you want a little bit of extra healing throughput, those are maybe your best bet. Or you can play Crucible of Flame for just a little bit of extra healing, mostly for the damage, is this one on single target. The best traits for Holy Paladin are 3 Glimmer of Light. The Glimmer build is by far the best thing Holy Pallies can do in M+, and that will continue to be true in the next patch, even after Glimmer gets nerfed. Holy Pallies also want to play 1 copy of Light's Decree, which is a ret trait. It has a bunch of text on it that doesn't do anything for Holy Pallies, but it does have 1 line on it that does work for Holy Pallies, which is Wings is increased by 5 seconds, and that turns out to be enough to be worth a full trait. Holy Pally trinkets, there's a lot of options here. A good one is just the Alchemy Stone, if you can craft that. Other good ones from raid, Luminous Jollyweed, nice because it drops from an early boss in the raid and just a good healing throughput one. Ajara's Font of Power, also a good one if you get a high eye level version of that, although pretty annoying to use, especially as a healer, because like, you know, DPS can channel Ajara's Font of Power in the first 2 seconds of a pull and it's fine, but healers usually have to actually be present as soon as the pull starts, so it's harder to find a time to actually channel Ajara's Font of Power. Aquapotent Nautilus, a great DPS trinket for Holy Paladins. Unfortunately, it only drops for ranged DPS specs, so you have to, and Holy Pally doesn't even have one of those that they can switch their loot spec to, so you need to get this traded to you. And if you're not interested in a raid or profession trinket, stuff from dungeons like Conch is a totally fine thing to use also. Okay, let's talk about synergies and tensions with Holy Pallies. You know how we were mentioning that Holy Pallies aren't druids? One of the things that best complements a Holy Pally is a druid, usually a balanced druid, although the other specs do work, to help cover those utility holes that you're missing as a Holy Pally relative to a resto druid. Another important thing to have as a Holy Pally is the engineering profession if you're trying to do high keys. This gives you access to a knock, a single target knock that you can use as a, you know, Typhoon, and engineering B-res, which is you can use as a battle res, but both of them are less good versions of, you know, Typhoon and Rebirth. But they do cover in a pinch much of the time. Some of the problems for Holy Pallies are actually the beguiling affix. Emissaries of the Tides are challenging for Holy Pallies because, unlike Resto Druids, Holy Pallies can't just keep rooting them forever and ever. So there are Tides pulls that become a problem with a Holy Pally in the group. That wouldn't be a problem with a Resto Druid. And Holy Pallies are also a spec that has a fairly hard time knocking enchanted emissaries. They don't have 0 tools. You know, you can throw judgments at it. You can taunt it off the global cooldown, and that does knock it as well. Or you can, you know, hodge it. But outside of those things, those are pretty high investment ways to knock the thing, and they don't have a spammable ranged way to keep the emissary, the enchanted emissary out of the group, like the other healing specs tend to. Another problem for Holy Pallies is if there are 5 melee in the group. If there are 5 melee in the group, some boss fights get a little weird. Holy Pallies count as melee for certain boss abilities, and they often want to be in melee to do healing. So bosses that get weirder, like first boss is Siege, is just going to pick any of the 5 players at random to pursue. So if that's your Rogue or whatever, they're not going to be happy. I guess they have Vanish, but if that's your Fury Warrior, they're not going to be happy if they're fixated by the first boss in Siege of Borealis. Or if everybody's in melee on Skycap and Crag, that's a problem. So usually the Holy has to just go out and heal from range. Trothak, the Shark Puncher, you know, throwing sharks in melee. Things get bad that way. So it's a really good idea to make sure you bring a ranged DPS player at least to your runs. One resource I'd like to mention is wingsisup.com. If you are interested in learning how to play Holy Paladin, this guide is so good. It's so much better than what any other spec has. This will tell you, you know, it'll tell you what builds to run, all the talents, all the stats, all the essences. It'll tell you where you can go to get your Azurite pieces that you need, and it'll give you specific information in the different dungeons about what different boss abilities do and how you can counter them as a Holy Pally. So I cannot recommend this website enough. As my internet poops out for a little second there and I have to refresh. So you can see like all the different like times you're supposed to use your cooldowns, which boss fights are hard, and you know, some specific notes and even some videos and explanations of what to do in different trash areas. So all around fantastic site. I'll put a link in the description, but if you are interested at all in picking up Holy Paladin and M+, there's no better source than this website. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed this Holy Paladin spec spotlight. Do let me know what specs you'd like to see up next. I'm going to continue trying to make 2 of these videos per week. If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Dratnos. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one.